Welcome this week in Missouri Politics. Big week at the state capitol, the state of the state. And we're here to talk about it with a person that runs the chamber the governor gave that address in, the new Speaker Pro Tem of the Missouri House of Representatives, Representative John Wiemann. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Scott, for having me.
You've been on the show a handful of times on our panel, but now that you're in this, what is a statewide office, tell folks a little about the background and your family and how you come to serve as Speaker Pro Tem of the House.
Well, Scott, my background is I'm a lifelong Missourian. My wife and I have been married for 28 years, almost 29 years, hard to believe. Have two wonderful sons that are doing well. One's in college and one's still in high school. And, small business owner. I've had my own company for about the last 10 years and just love Missouri and always been interested in politics, and decided 4 years ago it was time for me to serve my state.
Now, you're a guy who's a businessman who comes to this with a series of accomplishments in the private sector, but you also were a Roy Blunt guy, is that correct? I
did work for Roy Blunt when I was pretty young, and had an opportunity to work with him when he ran for governor, and actually I worked for him when he was in the Secretary of State's office, and so that was a great experience, and we've been lifelong friends, and he's been a mentor of mine as well.
Okay, so even folks that watch this show, you have to know the nuances. The Speaker of the House is Elijah Hart. He would be the top guy in the chamber, the number 2 position. Tell folks a little bit what the Speaker Pro Tem's job does and what you're going to do with it.
You know, that's a great question. I get asked that all the time. It's kind of a mystery. I always tell people it's kind of like the Vice President. But the official duties of the Speaker Pro Tem is, number one, is to serve on behalf of the Speaker when he's unable to be on the dais running the proceedings of the session. Other positions or other responsibilities of the Speaker Pro Tem are a little bit more just dependent on the person who's serving in that capacity. And what I plan to do, and what I ran on as a platform, is that I want to serve the caucus members, really helping them with their legislation once it gets out of the House and it goes over to the Senate. Kind of be the House leadership advocate for members over in the Senate. Because what happens a lot of times is the Speaker's very busy. He's dealing with a lot of issues throughout the day. The floor leader's very busy working on what we're going to deal with for the day and for the week. And they're certainly involved in negotiations with the Senate. But you know, we need to have someone from leadership over there in the Senate working with senators, working with Senate leadership to make sure that our priorities are being considered and taken into consideration. And also that I can be there on behalf of the Speaker and on behalf of the floor leader to help, advocate for what we're trying to get done.
So tell us about those guys. So Elijah Hart, the new Speaker, working with him, what is Elijah Hart like, and what kind of Speaker do you think he'll be?
Well, he's a young guy. He's a dynamic guy.
Outstanding speech he gave before the body.
Fantastic. He kind of teared up there at one point, and was very, very emotional to him, and I thought he gave a fantastic speech. I was actually sitting there because I had to give a speech after him. I'm thinking, wow, he's killing it. I'm going to have to not overshadow him, but at least do at least as good as he did. But I expect big things out of Elijah. Yeah. I think he's going to do well. He's smart. He listens to people. He's asked for my input. He's asking for input from the floor leader, which I think is very smart. So I anticipate that he will have a successful term as Speaker. Rob Vescovo, who's the floor leader, certainly has. He's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. He's behind the curtains. He's pulling a lot of the levers, and he does a very good job at that.
You know, I think nobody I've never heard of put as many miles on their car, worked as hard in a leadership race as Rob Vescovo. And I kind of thought you followed in that vein a little bit, where you went and saw everyone. I think maybe the floor leader Vescovo in his race raised the bar for what is expected in a leadership race.
Well, he certainly, and I actually asked him, when I was looking at running, I met with him, I think it was in June, and he asked me how many miles I had traveled, and I said, well, I've traveled 4,000 miles. He said, well, that's not enough. I'm like, well, how many do you have to travel? And he said, well, I traveled about 40,000 miles. I'm like, well, I guess I better get going. So, one transmission later, I racked up about 25,000 miles in about a 7-month period of time, and that's what you have to do to travel our state. Our state's a big state, and there's a lot of people to see.
So let's talk about the state of the state address that the governor gave this week. Come in, and the speech was. It was a very adult speech. It was almost the kind of speech you would give if you had serious policy proposals you wanted to present to a legislative body. You were in the chamber. What'd you think?
Well, certainly he had some very serious topics that he wanted to address, and I thought he gave a very good speech. He hit his points that he wanted to make. The governor has a pretty bold position with regards to dealing with the infrastructure problem. He has a new idea that he wants to propose, and we're going to have to, vet that through the legislature to see whether that's what we want to do. He's proposing, I think, about a $500 million bond proposal for funding. As you know, we've turned down, the taxpayers have turned down tax increases for roads, and so we're going to have to think outside the box, and that's what the governor's trying to do. He's also very, very much advocating for workforce development. I know that in my district and around the state, unemployment's very low. In St. Charles County, it's 2.1%. There are plenty of jobs. There's just not enough qualified people to work in those jobs. Sure. And so we need to get a workforce that can be there to provide those needed positions to be filled.
That was interesting. You're a business person. I find a lot of W-2 Republicans that'll tell you all these grandiose things about economic development, but they've never created a job in their life. You actually know what it's like to make a payroll. There is a point. I thought the governor had a good point. It's not conservative just to try to keep state employee pay as low as you can and then expect that they're just going to do a good job. You get a better employee oftentimes at $30,000 than you do $25,000. I thought he had a point. Maybe fewer state employees, but we got to raise the pay so you can either get better employees or you can pay the good ones you have and keep them.
That's certainly a logical business decision that any other business would do. State of Missouri has around 43,000 state employees. I know that we're in the top tier when it comes to the number of employees per citizens. So we need to take a look at making our state government leaner and meaner and more efficient. And I think the governor's right on target with trying to make our state government more efficient in how we operate. I know that, I'll give you a perfect example. Department of Revenue, 2 years ago, when they were reviewing their call center, their average answering percentage was 30%. So if 10 people called, only 3 people were getting through to the Department of Revenue call center. Now, since they've gone in and completely revamped it, they said, you know what, this is unacceptable. We shouldn't be providing this type of service for our citizens. We should be doing better than that. It's now in the high 90s percentile. And that's just
Jerome a bright guy, ain't he?
Yeah, just changing the culture of the entity, the various departments. And that's what we have to do. We have to change the culture within our government bureaucracy.
Let's talk about one place where folks are doing that. I thought it was a really nice moment in the chamber when the governor recognized Todd Richardson, who's running the Medicaid program. Instant standing ovation by Republicans, Democrats. The gallery even stood up. I thought it was a fitting tribute to someone who served the state very well. But now he's actually cutting. I mean, in order to have money to do some of these things, if the revenues are going to, there was a tax cut, so the revenues aren't going to really grow that much. Todd Richardson's doing some cuts in Medicaid, actually some reforms that are saving real money.
He has to. We don't have a choice, and he is the right man to do that job. Todd knows how to bring people together. He listens. I expect him, and I've talked to him already about some ideas that I had that we could consider for Medicaid reform, but we have no choice. That area of our budget is increasing at an astounding rate.
You can't keep that up.
We can't sustain that. It has to be dealt with, and so it's all hands on deck to try to find ways to reform what we're doing. I'm all about providing care for those people who need it, who need that help. We should provide that help, but we need to make sure we're keeping those people who can help themselves out of that system. That way there's more resources to help the people who are really in need. And I think that's one of the things we have to do as well, because I've heard that our numbers have spiked back up again. We were on a downward spiral. At one time we had like 1 million people on Medicaid. I think it got down around the mid 600,000 range, and I think it's been spiking back up again. So we're going to have to address that.
Most honorable man to hold that gavel, though. It was kind of nice to see him get honored in the chamber like that. That was one of the more touching moments of the speech. Let's talk about something you've been very outspoken on. It's initiative petition reform. It seems like when you have a situation like in California, the Republicans are very marginalized, probably some of the Democrats here in Missouri, and they do initiative petitions to try to impact policy. The Democrats pick that up. Sean Nicholson, brilliant strategist, come up with the Clean Missouri. There was a raising the minimum wage. The Republicans are now talking about ways to reform an initiative petition process. I'm sure it'll be a little harder, but maybe a little more streamlined, right?
Yeah, really the issue is that the number of petitions has spiked up significantly. So I'll give you an example. In 2008, the number of initiative petitions that were filed at the Secretary of State's office was 55. Now, this past year, it was 371 petitions were filed, just within a 10-year span. And, you know, of that 371, you had about, I think, 120 or so that were actually approved for circulation, and then of that, only 5 made it on the ballot. There's a cost to put those petitions out there. And what's happening, you have very few special interest, outside special interest groups and individuals that are filing petitions, multiple petitions. Some are filing, I mean, 10, 20, 30 petitions just on one topic. And they're abusing the system. They're circumventing the traditional process of us passing laws in Missouri.
Can you find that sweet spot, though? The founders of our state put that process in place for a reason. There's got to be a sweet spot in maybe not having 300, but maybe still having a viable way for real ideas to be put forward to the people, maybe even going around the legislature to do it.
Well, I certainly am not advocating for us to get rid of the initiative petition process. I think it's something that we should have in our Constitution. We should keep it in our Constitution. I think we should have it to where it's for legitimate purposes, and there needs to be safeguards in there to prevent someone trying to game the system. So, for example, right now in Missouri, you have to have, if it's for a statutory change, it's have to have 5% of the population has to sign the petition. 6 out of 8 congressional districts. If it's a constitutional amendment, it has to be 8% of the population, 6 out of 8 congressional. And then when you vote on it, it's a simple majority. So there's a couple things that we could do to kind of raise the bar. It shouldn't be easy to change Missouri's Constitution. Sure. I mean, the United States Constitution is very difficult to amend. Our Constitution should be the same way. I mean, we have bingo in our Constitution. And that's how easy it is to put something on our Constitution.
Well, it's going to be an interesting session. Missouri House Speaker Pro Tem John Wiemann, thank you for joining us. Hope you come back and talk and visit with us as the session unfolds.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with our opinion maker panel. Joe Lakin, the best hair in Missouri politics, coming on after this. But first, go to showmemissouri.com. That's with an AH, like it's supposed to be said. This week, we sit down with Commissioner Sam Bushman and a good crew in Cole County, Missouri, to talk about the seat of state government in the state of Missouri. Go to showmemissouri.com and learn the history of the state, one county at a time. We'll be right back.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Looking to get quality insurance at a price you can afford? Now you can, thanks to CFM Insurance. Select from our broad range of farm, home, and rental property coverage. Find an agent right in your local area, as CFM is represented by a network of 200 independent agencies throughout Missouri. For personal and dependable service, from a company with a history of insuring the families of Missouri that dates back to 1869, visit WeInsureMissouri.com and find an agent near you today.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads, because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
At Ameren, Missouri, we know what light can do. It draws people together and chases monsters away. And if you shine it in the right direction, it will light the path for the next generation, showing them what their tomorrow could look like, and spotlighting the possibilities that lay in front of them. Investing in our community by lighting the way forward. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back this week in Missouri Politics. Opinion Maker panel time. John Gaskin, St. Louis County NAACP. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Jane Dueker, maven of everything, maybe Queen of Chesterfield. Welcome back.
I'm happy to be here.
New State Representative, Representative O'Donnell, thank you for joining us. First time on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And Joe Lakin, best hair of Missouri Politics. Welcome back, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Let me start off at the top. State of the State address. I thought it was a momentous week, second only to the birthday of Georgia May, correct?
That's right.
First 1 year old, right?
That's right, this week. Absolutely.
So I guess as part of the birthday festivities, she watched the State of the State address.
That's it. That's precisely right.
What'd you think?
She was a big fan, absolutely. I think like most people in Missouri, I think it's refreshing to watch Governor Parson, both from a political and messaging perspective to see his discipline to workforce development, job creation, and infrastructure, but also from a leadership perspective. Clearly, that's what that administration's waking up every day, thinking about, talking about, and working towards. And I think you saw in his budget priorities, that's exactly what he's going to do this session.
Representative, I mean, you're sitting there, it was like an adult speech to adults about real things. How was it received in the chamber?
It was well done, and I like that he's going right back at things like transportation. You know, the bonding thing was a bit of a surprise, but it's a good thing. I mean, voters rejected the gas tax, but yet they still continue to say fix our roads and bridges. So let's go at it a different approach, and it's not a bad approach. The bond market, the interest rates are still down, so it's not a bad time to borrow money. But it'll be interesting to see how it'll be received, because the word debt is a four-letter word, figuratively and actually, sometimes in our caucus. So.
Well, you go into workforce development, you go into not building new prisons, maybe even closing one, changing some of those programs. He did a huge reshuffle in state government this week. I mean, these are real adult ideas to move the state forward. It may not fit in a Facebook post, but it's real adult things that could actually see state government run better.
Right, certainly, and they're going to take some thought and take some doing, but he's on the right track. Jane
Dueker, if you're Gina Walsh, the senator who very accomplished, she's a serious policymaker too.
Absolutely.
Gina Walsh really is when you're in a room with her, she's a real contributor to public policy.
Absolutely.
Be hard to rebut that speech.
Well, I mean, I thought she did a good job, because look, one, I will say it is very nice that we're talking policy again. I'm not going to agree with everything that Governor Parson says. I'm not going to, love everything. But the fact that we're actually having a real policy discussion again is incredibly refreshing. I'm very happy that he is sticking with transportation. I agree with you on that. That is a huge issue. And it's something we have to invest in our state, and it's time. And I'm glad that he's taken, and he's not giving up, and that means a lot to me, even as a Democrat. So, but I also agree that just crossing the bar of Eric Greitens is not enough. I mean, I'm glad that she is there to hold him accountable. I actually think that he will appreciate that. The good thing is you don't have someone now who is afraid to listen to opposition and afraid to listen that there might be a better way of doing something. And I think Gina is a perfect person to make sure that we hold him accountable, and I don't think he'll be offended by it. I think he'll be an adult about it, and he'll say, okay, let's figure out a way to get this done. Now we're bargaining to get things done. We're not fighting. I mean, boy, what a difference a year makes. Last year's State of the State was, a pretty tense time for our state.
It was more interesting than this year.
It
you
was.
have to give it that. Workforce development, John Gaskin, transportation, raise for state employees, reshuffling state government. Hard to really find a lot if you're a Democrat to disagree with in that speech.
Sure. I have to give the governor credit, moving workforce development over to higher ed obviously prioritizes it as skill sets that we need within our communities. Number two, as it relates to giving state employees a raise, that's something obviously labor unions and other groups have fought hard for.
It's also the business principle of
absolutely.
You go to corrections, right? And you want and I think corrections after revenue is going to be maybe the people that are attacking it. If you're paying someone $24,000 a year to go in and do some of the toughest jobs in the state, it doesn't make business sense. You're not going to keep people, right?
Right. You have to pay them competitive salaries. And number two, worker morale increases when people feel like they are being compensated properly for the work that they're putting in, especially state workers. I mean, so they're giving back to our community. I think we ought to pay them fairly. But overall, I think we have a tremendous opportunity in the history of the Senate here in this state. With Gina Walsh as the Democratic floor leader, Brian Williams, who's there new, you've got Carla May, Jamila Nasheed, Senator Curls. We have a tremendous opportunity to move some equity issues in the Senate, especially under that historic leadership.
Joel, again, when you listen to that speech, it was an adult speech. It had real priorities in it. You wonder, is it too serious? Do we live in not a serious enough time to have somebody come in and actually, can we as a state talk about real things?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, you look at Governor Parsons' approval ratings around the state, you talk to people, I think people appreciate his focus on big issues. I know talking to Senator Schatz and Speaker Haar, you know, they're focused on big things. I think the theme of the week was big and bold, and I think all three of those leaders are focused on that moving forward.
Let's talk about there was a debate that could go unnoticed by some. In the Missouri House of Representatives, there was an amendment to the rules to be changed by Representative Greg Razor of Kansas City. Talked about essentially adding non-discrimination language against people in the LGBT community to the House rules. It went down, but there was a real debate on it.
There was a real debate on it. It seemed like the wrong place to have that. It seems like that, you know, the right places to have that debate is, you know, bringing some kind of legislation forward. But yeah, the rules seemed like an odd place for that to me.
It seemed to me like the rules were the odd place to have it, but the debate was pretty above board, and, and a lot of people chimed in with a pretty serious discussion, you know.
Indeed, they did.
Jane Dueker, is this something where Republicans used to score points off the LGBT community in certain parts of Missouri? Now this is a liability to a lot of people that traditionally vote Republican?
Yes, I do. I think the tide is turning, and I'm good for Greg Razor for doing that, because
he did very well.
He did very well, and while some may think it was not the right place, for him it's always the right place, and I applaud him for doing it. I do think that the debate was, again, adult, and I think we're on the verge. I think this state has realized that this does nothing for our community. Discrimination is never a good idea, and it doesn't move you forward. It always keeps you back.
So, Lakin, is this an issue? I mean, you do Republican campaigns. Is this an issue that it's an age thing? I mean, I don't think the party of Elijah Haar or Caleb Rowden is the party that would be the party discriminated against gay people.
Yeah, look, I think any polling you look at, any data you look at, there's clearly a generational shift on these issues. I think ultimately these non-discrimination LGBT issues appear to be inevitable to pass in Missouri. You've seen them pass in other states, and I think that's where we're headed just generationally.
To me, it's just it's not so much that maybe people that are of an older generation or more bigoted or whatever. It's just the norms you grew up with. The people of the Caleb Rowden's generation is not the kinds that are going to be wanting to score points, even politically, off gay Missourians.
Well, look, I think your governor, your legislative leaders want to focus on big issues. I think they want to focus on you know, transportation, infrastructure, workforce development. I think that's going to be the focus, and I think spending a whole session talking about these kinds of issues, I don't think is going to be the priority.
John Gaskin, I think Republicans in some parts of the state would come and maybe write off parts of St. Louis County to maybe score up bigger margins in other parts of the state off of gay issues that they would tab as gay issues. Today, I think that's not a lot. That will hurt you in most of Missouri.
Absolutely. I mean, like Jane just mentioned, you know, we should not be finding ourselves in a situation where we're having a policy discussion about advancing constitutional issues that are going to discriminate against people. We saw it with SJR 39, with Mike Colonna's compelling testimony in that hearing that day, where you had Republicans and Democrats both in tears because he broke it down into an issue. This could be your son, your daughter, your neighbor. You know, no one likes to be mistreated. No one likes to be marginalized. And I think our state has too much potential to be focused on ways that we're dividing people.
I'm not sure that that's not where you saw the mettle of Elijah Hart. He chaired the House committee that dealt with that.
Yeah.
I think that might have been the time where people saw him not just as a young person, but as a leader in the state.
Absolutely.
That was an important move for him. I believe that.
Let's talk. So we've always heard this war on women, right? There's a huge war on women. It's usually tasked with Republicans.
Is it over finally?
Well, I think maybe.
Are we going to focus on roads and not women? That would
maybe
be awesome.
The perpetrators of that war have moved to the Democrat Party in St. Louis County. They've decided that now, if you don't pay your child support, you're not going to have to pay a bail if you end up getting arrested. And to get this moved all this far, it is years of a process of not paying the child support. Now you have the new Wesley Bell, the new elected prosecutor, decided this state law. He's not going to enforce it to the limit of having bail.
I'm really disappointed by this move.
Supported by many liberals.
And I agree with you, but the problem is, look, I get that you don't put poor people in jail because they're poor, and it does no good to put someone in jail if they're capable of paying their child support, and that's why prosecutors are given discretion in these matters. And so he always has the discretion not to prosecute someone because he thinks if I keep them out of jail, they'll be able to pay their child support. But to take that tool completely off the table, I think, is irresponsible. I mean, you know, people are getting phone calls saying, oh, I guess I don't have to pay now. Women are terrified because this does predominantly affect women. This will disparately impact women more than men. That's just a reality right now. Maybe that will change someday.
Sure. Common sense.
But this is a major problem. You know, St. Louis County collects anywhere from $6 to $8 million a year on behalf of the state in child support. What are these families going to do if that starts to slow down? That's families who can't put food on the table. I don't understand why you lead with that.
Representative, these are your constituents. You're from South County. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of liberals that'll stand up for a theoretical abortion that a woman may or may not have throughout her life. But this is a real thing that affects real working women Missourians.
Indeed, and Jane's last comment there is exactly what I was thinking was, why did he lead with this? I mean, this is not a good thing. We have a lot of problems to deal with in St. Louis County, from his office particularly, and to lead with, you know, protecting people that aren't taking care of their responsibilities just seems wrong to me.
Joel, this kind of feeds into the thought of maybe liberals are very theoretical, but when it comes to practicality, there's a lot of women that will be impacted by this, and it is a bizarre thing to say you're going to go light on it.
Yeah, look, I think there's clearly you talk about generational changes on issues. There is a move towards criminal justice reform nationally. You see it among Republicans too. But I think the key on that is discernment. A lot of times prosecutorial discernment to make a determination on these things. And I think, again, at the end of the day, if you don't punish bad behavior, you're probably going to get more of it. And so, you know, I think something probably you see Jeff City take a look at as well.
This is a guy that comes in, a lot of people, I was impressed with him. I am impressed with him. It was an odd misstep, it looked to me like, to say there was a lot of these things we're not going to do cash bail on. Who cares if anyone smokes pot, really? But you come down to that, it seemed like a misstep early on.
Sure. You know, we have a lot of resources in St. Louis County and across the region to help fathers who may not necessarily be in a position to be able to pay their child support. For example, Father Support Center with Halbert Sullivan. The Urban League has a program with Save Our Sons. And St. Louis County, the Justice Center also has a program that helps a lot of young people.
Well, we got a program that's about to run out of time, so I'm about to ask you who the men left who won the week.
Yeah, I absolutely have to say Greg Razor.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Governor Parson for sticking with transportation.
Who won the week?
I'm going to go with Elijah Har and Rob Boscovo, having the confidence in their caucus to let the rules discussion, just pretty much anything come to the floor that they wanted, and having confidence in us to do the right thing.
I think that does show some confidence and security to let that play out like they did.
Indeed.
Who won the week?
Missouri Republicans, our legislative leaders, our governor, clear vision for the state this session.
Hat tip to you. I know you're a big part of Scott Fitzpatrick's career. It was a terrific day to see him sworn in. That was talk about a generational change. I remember when first started the Missouri Times, it was his first year there, and to see him move into a position like that was pretty interesting.
Absolutely.
I'm going to say somebody that has won the week many, many times on this program, but for an interesting reason. Todd Richardson, the former speaker, the most honorable man to ever hold that gavel, runs the Medicaid. He was mentioned in the governor's State of the State speech to a standing ovation by Republicans, Democrats, the gallery, everyone. I think he won the week. And we'll see you back here next week on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, Spire, and Sterling Bank.